Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania,
where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us back to Gettysburg, where we've discussed once before. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
Let's get into it. So, before when we talked about Gettysburg, we talked about the Jenny Wade house.
Right.
And we mentioned that we have both been to Gettysburg, but neither of us have had any paranormal experiences there. This location is Devil's Den, which is on the battlefield itself. Have you ever been to this location?
I don't think so. When I went to Gettysburg, I was pretty young, and so even if we did, I don't remember it fully.
Yeah, I was trying to remember because it's like a rocky outcropping, so I feel like I would remember it as a distinct difference to the battlefield.
Right.
But interestingly, I didn't know this until I researched. Tour guides are not allowed to go on the battlefield at Gettysburg.
Oh.
And you're only allowed to lead tours, period, if you are a registered tour guide. So, interesting. If you ever are in Gettysburg, they are either risking a huge fine or do have credentials.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, but I think because tour guides aren't allowed on the battlefields, I probably haven't been here, because I think I went for a school field trip with a tour guide. But anyways, so like I said, it's a rocky outcropping, and currently it's part of the park that is the battlefield. Actually, it's temporarily closed because there was erosion and safety issues because it's visited so much. This is one of the most visited parts of the battlefield.
Okay. See, then I feel like we must have gone. You know what I mean? Because my dad was super into the history of Gettysburg, so we must have been there.
Yeah, I feel like if you went with family, you definitely saw it. I don't know about school, because it is like a really bloody location.
Right.
So it was closed, reopened September of last year, so people can visit it now more safely. The battle was on July 2nd, 1863. And it was Robert E. Lee who launched the attack, and this was against everyone's advisement. So Robert E. Lee makes this unilateral decision to have the battle, and the result is 35,000 deaths over the next 2 days.
That just, against your advisors and causing that many deaths just seems very unnecessary.
Yeah. The historical context of this is that it was right after Stonewall Jackson's death, who was really close to Lee. So historians think that he wasn't really in the right mindset there. It was more of like a vengeance type thing.
Gotcha. That does make sense.
Yeah. Also, because this is terrible terrain for a battle, the terrain is rocky, as I mentioned earlier, and it created a maze for the soldiers because there were big boulders and stuff blocking the ways out of the rocks. The rocks are so sharp that people reported hurting themselves on the rocks.
That's really crazy. These things must have been huge.
Right, and to get lost, to hurt yourself, why stage a battle right here?
Honestly, I sometimes get stressed out when I'm in those corn mazes, so
Yes.
I cannot imagine going through a boulder maze.
Right.
Where your health is also at risk.
Yeah, and so some people said that it might have been chosen because it does provide hiding spots for ambushes, but the negative is that the sight lines were bad, so you would turn around a corner and you couldn't tell if the person in front of you was on your side or not, and you'd have to make a split-second decision.
Gotcha.
And to orient people, if they're familiar with the Battle of Gettysburg, this location is between Little Round Top and Big Round Top, which, if anyone knows anything about the Battle of Gettysburg, are significant landmarks in the battle. And this location specifically is responsible for 1,800 plus Confederate deaths and 800 plus Union deaths. Those numbers, so 2,600, doesn't include people injured in battle or people missing in action.
Okay.
They did find some journals of people who survived the battle, and their journals talk about, this is an exact quote, awful, awful rocks. That's like the main theme of the battle, so I cannot imagine how terrifying.
Well, right, because, just on solid ground, the battle probably would have been awful, so then to combine it with these huge boulders.
Right. So that's the history of it. And as is the theme with all of the places we've discussed, it's no surprise that these places are haunted.
Right.
With so many deaths and a terrible living experience for these people. It's considered one of the most haunted places in Gettysburg because the death toll was so high. And the story starts actually before the battle ever occurred. So this was way back when a Native American hunting ground, because the rocks provided great spots for the natives to stalk their prey. Additionally, there was allegedly a battle between natives called the Battle of the Crows that was noted to be very bloody and resulted in many deaths. So this place has a history of death that predates the war. Even before the Revolutionary War, early settlers told stories of ghosts in the area. So it's pre-haunted, we'll say.
Right.
Notably, early settlers have journal entries talking about a Native American chief roaming the grounds as if he's looking for his tribe, which would make sense if there was that battle there.
Yes, definitely.
And in general, early settlers named this place as, quote, a desolate and ghostly place. And they highlighted the menacing rocks and the maze-like configuration. So that takes us to the battle.
Yeah, that actually does make sense if spirits are like trapped.
Yeah.
In this area, I didn't make the connection between the maze and spirits being here, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
Right. Isn't there a saying that's like, so it is in life, it will be in death? Not
Yes.
the Catholic prayer, but I think that is a saying.
Yes.
And it makes a lot of sense. So day one of the battle happens,
Okay.
incredibly bloody, but soldiers were ordered to stand guard over the den because it was Confederate ground at that time and Lee didn't want to lose it.
Okay.
So throughout the night, they rotated the shift and soldiers wrote of strange and unnerving surroundings. Many said that it felt like they shared space between the living and dead. And is that because, they just watched their friends die? Maybe. Or is it because of the Native American hauntings that are there? Who knows?
Right.
Post-battle, many of the dead were not buried for days, if they were buried at all, because with 2,600 dead, that's a lot of bodies to handle. And
yeah.
they did create mass graves on the battlefield, but some of the bodies didn't make it.
Right.
So, tourists have made countless reports of the hauntings. A woman in the 1970s went to Devil's Den at sunrise to take photos. She said she soon felt a presence of someone behind her, and when she turned around, she was face to face with what she described as a Civil War era man. He had long, dirty hair, ragged clothing, and no shoes on. He was pointing past her, and she turned to look, but when she turned back, he was gone.
That, I know I've said this before, but the watching something disappear before your eyes is so scary. I mean, already just seeing a person in front of you, and I mean, it said that they were face to face, right?
Yeah.
So they were close.
Yeah.
Oh.
It gets stranger. So that's the first account. A month or so later, another person came in with the same report of a similar man. The pattern has continued to present day, with people saying that they see this ghost pointing, and he's earned the name of the helpful hippie because he doesn't have shoes on.
That's good. Well, it's funny because when you said that the ghost had long hair, for a second my brain went, oh, well, I mean, it is the 1970s. And then I was like, oh my God, no, it's a ghost. It's a ghost.
Yeah. Some reports say that he actually talks and says what you're looking for is over there and points.
Right.
And historians have compiled all of the accounts and concluded that he looks just as a Texan soldier would have during the war, based on the descriptions.
That's really cool.
And all of the descriptions are congruent to each other. So it seems to be real that people are seeing this.
Yes.
There are other reports of a ghostly rider. He's seen riding a horse across the battlefield from a vantage point in Devil's Den, and sightings of him are accompanied by the loud sound of gunshots and men shouting, but he vanishes so quickly that no one has been able to identify who he may be or even what side of the war he was on.
Okay.
There are also reports of when you walk through the rocks, hearing whispers, almost as if people are still hiding in the maze, which I think would be so creepy.
Yes, definitely.
There's also cannon fire, gasps, and the sound of people choking on blood that have been reported.
That's tough.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So more significant than just sightings, there have been physical interactions as well. And this is enough to really spook me. There was a report of one woman feeling a hand grab her ankle while she was climbing the rocks, but she was climbing with one of her friends, so she thought her friend was trying to get her attention. She looked down, but instead of seeing her friend, she said she saw a shadowy figure dressed in Civil War era clothing. And she screamed for her friend to arrive and closed her eyes, but when her friend arrived, the figure was gone.
It's creepy enough that you feel something pulling your ankle and your friend isn't there, but to actually see the figure that's doing it is terrifying.
Right. And I mean, I don't know how you can explain that to your friend. I feel like if someone said that to me, I'd be like, okay, like, have you had enough water today? Are you seeing things?
Right.
But how absolutely terrifying. Moving on from like touching people, there are big issues with technology at this area, and it's actually pretty challenging to get photos of Devil's Den. There are sudden low battery issues or other inexplicable issues that tend to happen. And the rumor is that this is because there was a photo taken of a soldier dead by the rocks, and it was apparently a really famous photo because it showed the rocks in the background, and then this soldier had fallen seemingly perfectly with like his face turned and stuff. So it was a famous photo. As historians looked at that photo, they realized that the same dead body was photographed in multiple different locations. So the photos were all completely staged.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's really interesting. I can't even imagine what the motive would be for that.
I know. I guess because they were like, this body, whatever, is like significant enough to show the severity of the war, but not like so gruesome that people can't see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So the thought is that this specific man, his ghost haunts this area and makes it so that no photos can be taken because he doesn't want to discredit the battle at all. And they don't want anything else to be staged, which I think is one of the cooler stories we've heard.
Yes, and also extremely valid.
Right.
I would even understand if he was like, personally, I just don't want anybody else taking pictures because my body got dragged around this place.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like it goes with what we always talk about with like moving dead bodies and not getting any real rest when people pass away.
Yes.
So those are the stories.
Those were super cool. I mean, I think this is some of the most like clear cut examples that we've seen on the podcast so far.
Yeah, it's not just like there are like noises in the distance, but these are like very significant interactions that have been reported repeatedly.
Right.
And that's what gives them credit to me.
Yes.
So I would personally love to go back. I think that I would appreciate Gettysburg in general differently now that I'm an adult versus like a middle schooler, I guess, for the history and the ghosts. And I don't know if I would go at night because I think it would be pretty eerie. I also think you're not allowed on the battlefield after dusk, but
that makes sense.
I think it would be eerie. But would you go day and night? Yes
in the daytime. If we were climbing boulders and something grabbed my ankle, though, I would not turn around. I'd probably climb faster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would, because again, I agree with you. Like, I wasn't really able to appreciate it as a kid. Like, I remember thinking it was super cool. But I've always wanted to go back to really like understand things a little bit more. I don't think I would go at night either. Yeah. I think it'd be too freaky.
Yeah. It just feels like, I don't know, centuries of hauntings here.
Yes.
Do I really need to mess with that?
Right. you know? And in the daytime, like, it's still light. I feel a little bit safer. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I feel like these ghostly happenings really do happen at night. And that's another thing that we've talked about. Like, I don't want to disturb the spirits.
Right.
And I feel like at night, that's just...
Yeah. And I feel like I would not try to take photos if I came here.
Right.
Like, maybe not even bring my phone. It seems like that is agitating the spirits there.
Yes.
Not worth it.
And we've talked before, the technology thing is interesting because we've talked before in one of the other episodes about how the ghosts were uncomfortable with the technology because they just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And that also makes sense in this context because they're in a maze, so they're probably already confused, and watching these, like, newfangled technology devices.
iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. I think it's really interesting. I think these are some of the most unique stories, like you said, that we've talked about.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Join us next week to see what haunting we discuss next.